Chapter 24. The cold rasp of a slide being pulled back on a gun echoed through the room and brought them back to reality. Well, isn't that sweet? You have something precious to remember your poor dead parents by. Too bad. I think I'll be taking it all now. The sound of Pierre's mocking voice sent chills down their respective backs as they turned around. He had entered the room without them hearing anything, and now stood with the door closed behind his back. Gripped in his hand was the same gun he had used at the hospital, with the attached silencer. It was pointed unwaveringly at Lexie's head, though his eyes were on Jay. Pierre kicked over a large bag that had been on the ground behind his feet. Put everything in your parents' safety deposit box in that bag, now. Even while speaking, his aim never so much as wavered an inch off Lexie. Jay stepped to Lexie's side, hoping to partially block his view of the box. They might be able to get one of the guns out of the box, if they were careful. None of that now. Both of you move behind the box where I can see you put everything in the bag. He told them, looking specifically at Jay as he did so. For whatever reason, he seemed to have decided he was the more dangerous of the two. Jay grumbled lightly under his breath, cursing the other man for actually knowing what to do in this kind of situation. They had been forced to play everything by ear so far, and while it might have worked up till now, their luck had obviously failed them this time. Stepping around the box, Jay kept Lexie as close to his side as he could. Maybe he would be able to shield her if Pierre pulled the trigger. Why are you doing this? Why are my parents important to you? Lexie asked, peering intently around Jay's broad, muscled shoulder. Move everything into the bag, and maybe then I'll tell you, Pierre responded snidely. Bending the rest of the way, they began pulling the folders from the box and moving them into the large bag at their feet. It was only when the folders were gone that Jay pulled the first of the guns free from the box. Pierre chuckled. I see now. That is what you wanted to hide from me. Why don't you put that back in the box and close the lid? Pierre told him when he saw the gun. Lexie nudged his shoulder and nodded to the box, urging him to do as he had been asked. Placing the unused gun back into the box, he closed the lid, sealing the contents inside. Put the box back and close the door now, Pierre told them, indicating the empty hole where they had pulled the box from. And just as a tip, you could have hidden the gun behind, or even inside a folder. You might have gotten lucky, or you might have all died. Who knows? Jay shook his head disconsolately, refusing to let the other man's words get to him. It didn't matter. The guns weren't loaded or cocked. Pierre would have heard if he had done either of those and ended him. Hiding them like that would have only ended with him dumping them pointlessly in the bag under the man's watchful eye. Doing as Pierre requested, he closed the door when he was finished. Everyone in the room watched as the seal around the safety deposit door lightened, and then faded from view completely. There was nothing left to indicate that a door had ever even been there. This was definitely not a normal bank, but then Jay thought, would Spies really have used a normal bank anyway? Are you going to tell us now why you have been following us? Jay asked as he stepped away from the wall and rejoined Lexie. Their captor dithered for a second, his bobbling from side to side. No, I do not think so, Pierre replied in a sing-song voice while smiling. Abruptly, the smile vanished. You are unimportant, a means to an end, nothing more. I would have killed you right away that first time I saw you. Except I was told you would lead us to something of her parents. The cold and emotionally devoid tone of his voice let them know that he wouldn't have lost any sleep if he had. Before them stood a person who could kill a person in cold blood and not feel so much as a twinge in his conscience. Pierre focused his cold, dead gaze on Lexie once more. I believe you have forgotten to put something in the bag. Lexie trembled as she pulled the envelope from where she had hurriedly stuffed it earlier. No, Jay objected, stepping in front of Lexie as he did. He felt her moving behind him, her hands blocked by his body. That is all she has to remember her parents by. Let her keep it. He demanded, keeping Pierre's eyes focused solely on him and not on what Lexie was doing. I do not see why it matters. Neither of you is going to live through this anyway. She will not be needing it when her body is as cold as her parents. Now step out of the way. I want to see her put it in the bag. Jay felt Lexie's hand still behind him. Whatever she had been doing before, she was done now. Fine, Jay spit out with as much venom as he could muster, stepping to the side so Lexie was in clear view. Grinding his teeth, he watched helplessly as Lexie dropped the envelope into the bag before closing it. Good, now one of you pick it up. We're going for a little walk. Pierre smiled at them coldly as Jay picked up the heavy bag and put the strap for it over his shoulder. Pierre slowly backed towards the door and into the hallway beyond, flicking his eyes off them for the first time as he made sure no one was waiting for them. Seeing only an empty hallway, he motioned for them to follow him with his free hand. After letting Lexie go first, Jay intentionally let the bag hit his legs. With a grunt that was only half feigned, he stumbled into the wall next to the door. Reaching out to regain his balance, one of his fingers jabbed at the button Reinette had told them to push if they needed help. He wasn't sure this was exactly what she had had in mind when she had told them, but if it brought help of any kind, he wouldn't complain. What are you doing? Hurry up, Pierre told him as he pushed away from the wall. Jay merely grunted, readjusted the bag, and stepped fully into the hallway, joining Lexie and Pierre. How did you know where to find us? Lexie asked as Jay joined her, grabbing his hand as he did so. A traitorous little birdie told me, Pierre replied snidely. Lexie gripped Jay's hand firmly as they tried to understand what he was saying. That way, now walk. Pierre pointed down the hallway that would lead them to the very rear of the building. Keeping his gun trained on them the entire time, he directed them through the depths of the building. I've already cleared our way, so don't worry about meeting anyone unexpected, he told them with a malicious grin that chilled their blood. Who could have told him? The only one who knew that we were even coming here was Betty. Jay hissed as quietly as he could. I don't think it was her, maybe someone in whatever organization she belongs to told them, Lexie replied just as softly. I'm sure she reported to them after we called her. So that would make sense. Jay agreed readily, staying closely beside Lexie. Ahead of them, they could hear the quiet sounds of people talking. Urging them forward, Pierre followed them around a corner and an armed group of people came into view. Each was clothed fully in black gear and huddled around a door leading to the outside. They were motioning to the door as they spoke in harsh whispers. What's going on? We need to be leaving, Pierre asked them in French as they stepped into view. We can't reach the team that was stationed outside. We heard something just before you arrived, but when we tried to get them on the radio to ask what it was, there was no response. Gunshots? Pierre asked simply, as he took the proffered radio unit. That's not what it sounded like. One of the men standing next to the door said. Open the door and find out then. We don't have much time left. Pierre growled forcefully. The men nearest the door nodded slightly to each other and moved into position, flanking the sides of the door. Pushing it open slightly, a thin ray of orange light emanating from the setting sun entered the room. I don't see anyone. Our team is not out there, they were told quietly by the lead man. They must have seen something and went after it. Hurry up before someone else comes, Pierre told them after a moment's deliberation, urging them to open the door and move. Jay could hear Pierre cursing under his breath in a mix of French and English with a possible third language mixed in as well. The man in the lead pushed the door open and motioned them forward. His eyes were constantly scanning the now empty area where their other team had been. The nameless man opened his mouth to say something just before his body was thrown back against the door, smearing it with his blood all the way down. The muffled crack of a suppressed gunshot sounded at the same time his body was flung against the door. A sizable dent appeared in the door, where it had stopped the bullet after it had exited the man's supposedly bullet-resistant gear. Pierre began yelling for everyone to move back inside. 2 more gunshots rang through the air before everyone could hide behind the walls inside. One right after the other, 2 more people fell to the ground, lifeless. Jay and Lexie crouched motionless just to the side of the door inside the building. They were too scared to move, lest they draw attention to themselves. Neither wanted to die just yet, especially without even having a chance to fight for their lives. Pierre was behind them, ordering the remaining 2 people on his team to remain inside. This time he was speaking to them in English instead of French. It made Jay and Lexie wonder if his team had been made up of people from different countries, instead of just France. The last echoes of the suppressed gunshots reverberated around the small room, ringing in their ears before finally fading. Silence suddenly reigned, with only the quiet sounds of the 3 remaining captors and 2 hostages shuffling around, filling the sudden void. "Can you move the body? We need to get that door closed," Pierre demanded coldly, refusing to identify the former member of his team by name. The remaining 2 members of his team eyed each other, and then the body draped in front of the door. His blood had pooled out from his body, darkening as it cooled. "I should be able to get a grip on him," the man nearest the door muttered angrily. Moving closer to the door, he slid his hand along the ground until it was next to the shoulder of his fallen comrade. Wrapping his fingers around a webbed strap that ran up the body, he pulled with a constipated-sounding grunt. Slowly, he managed to drag the heavy, lifeless body back into the building. The door closed with an echoing bang, spraying the blood that had pooled in front of it on the ground everywhere. Jay jerked as he felt the still slightly warm blood hit his face instead of Lexie. He held back the urge to gag reflexively as she began wiping it off with her sleeve. "Thanks," he whispered. "What are we going to do now?" the man who had not retrieved the body asked. Now we leave through one of the other exits. Why do you think we made sure to know where they were all located in the first place?" Pierre asked derisively. The man snapped his head around at Pierre. "You have no room to talk right now. They are dead because of your bullshit orders just now." Pierre moved away from where he had been standing next to the wall, his gun held firmly in his hand. "Do you want to join them? Now that this has happened, I do not really need to worry about being quiet, now do I?" His cold voice indicated exactly what he thought of everyone there. "I do not believe that will be necessary. Everyone put down your weapons and we may let you live." Reinette's voice echoed around them. "Your little birdie here sold you out. They may have gotten you inside, but all the other exits have been blocked. I never really liked him anyway, so it's not a big loss for the bank." Pierre's brow twitched at the birdie comment, and he turned to glare at Jay and Lexie, who merely shrugged. "Let us live. Do you even know who we are?" he asked the air defensively, his head swiveling to find where she was speaking from. "I do. I even know who you work for. Just know that neither tends to hold any weight here." Jay's eyes were drawn to the ceiling, where he spotted the grill of a speaker embedded hiding the intercom system. "If you know who we work for, then you also know that what we are doing here is a sanctioned operation. One that you are currently interfering with," Pierre stated coldly, looking around the room, not having spotted the intercom yet. Reinette's laughter reached their ears as she stepped around the corner, passing off the microphone as she did so. Guards filled the hallway behind her and to her sides, flanking her. They had blocked off the hallway entirely, and each held guns in their hands, their aim pointed steadily at the armed assailants. "No, it is not, it never was. In fact, the French government does not even know you are here, do they?" Reinette mocked him from across the hallway. "What is she talking about?" Jay heard one of the members of Pierre's team ask. Lexie pulled on Jay's sleeve as she stepped carefully away from the door, and farther away from Pierre and his men. "It does not matter," Pierre replied in his signature cold voice. Spinning suddenly, he grabbed Jay before he could move farther away, and secured him between the wall of guards and himself. "Do what you will with them. I do not care. I, however, will be seeing you again." Pierre grabbed the bag from Jay, slipping the strap from his shoulder as he shoved him towards Reinette and her guards. Kicking the door open, he ran out of the building as the sound of gunfire filled the air. Jay stumbled forward as Pierre shoved him. He fell to the floor as quickly as he could, resisting his body's natural desire to regain its balance. From the corner of his eye, he spotted Lexie doing the same and flattening herself to the floor. The air above them erupted with gunfire as the guards opened fire on Pierre and the remaining 2 members of his team. The guards stopped firing as the sound of 2 bodies hitting the ground lifeless reached Jay's ears. "Quickly, we cannot let him get away," Reinette ordered as she ran towards the door, skirting Jay as she did so. Another loud crack filled the air as she opened the door. "I hope that means that she got him," Jay heard Reinette mutter. Climbing to his feet now that the shooting was over, he rushed to Lexie's side. Reinette looked back once before she rushed out of the building. "Stay here. There is much we need to talk about," she ordered, pinning them with her gaze. Jay wrapped Lexie in his arms as he helped her to her feet. "Are you all right?" Lexie asked Jay as his warmth engulfed her. "I'm fine. I fell on purpose to get out of the way of their guns. More importantly, are you all right?" he asked back as he separated from her. His hands ran over her arms and sides, searching for any signs of injury. Lexie playfully slapped his hands away and then took a step back from him. "They mostly ignored me. It's insulting, really. They practically forgot I was even there," she joked lightly, sagging against the nearby wall with relief that it was now over. "Be thankful for that. Everything could have been a lot worse if we had not arrived when we did," Reinette remarked as she returned. She was holding the bag that Pierre had forced them to place everything in. A nice layer of blood was now soaking the top portion of the bag. Jay turned to face her, his hand outstretched for the bloody bag. "Were you watching the entire time, or did you show up because of the button I pushed on the way out of that room?" "We will be holding on to this for now, if you do not mind." The way she phrased it was more a statement than a question. Reinette handed the bag to one of the guards, who quickly whisked it away. "We do mind, actually. The contents of that bag belong to me," Lexie said firmly, stepping closer to Reinette. "Then, if you are lucky, you will get them back when we are done with them." "If you are lucky," she said equally firmly, her tone brooking no argument from them. Looking away from Lexie, she addressed Jay once more, "In answer to your question, both. We already knew they had entered the building, and we were watching their movements. We had people placed outside, so even if someone else had not intervened, they would not have gotten away. You pushing the button would have been the right move, though, if we had not already known they were here. I heard him speaking with you, and knew something was wrong then regardless. I am curious, however, why did you think we knew that they were here beforehand?" Jay looked at her incredulously. "You're joking, right? It's obvious that this is no ordinary bank. Considering what Lexie's parents did for a living, and the security measures you have here. Not to mention the overly muscular people you have tending the counters, and it's plain that this is no mere regular bank. There is something else going on here." One of the guards that had left with Reinette earlier hurriedly entered the room. "He got away. His blood trail ends near the edge of the building. We lost part of a team there. He must have had additional people waiting and escaped with them." Reinette's jaw clenched tightly, showing the contours of her face as they were pulled taut. Noise from the rear of the building disturbed them before she could relax enough to respond. "We have incoming. One person, in possession of a large-caliber suppressed rifle, has stepped into view. They are holding the rifle above their head and are walking towards us slowly. What do you want us to do?" The radios they were wearing squawked to life around them. Reinette tapped her ear, being the only one who was not wearing a radio in plain sight, and began speaking. "Take her into custody and bring her to me right away. Do not harm her, but make sure that she is unarmed." She spoke firmly with the air of someone who was used to their orders being followed precisely and with precision. "It seems your friend has decided to grace us with her presence," Reinette told them as they waited. They were all silent as they waited for the intruder to be brought to them. Betty stepped into view surrounded by 4 guards with a 5th holding a peculiar-looking rifle with a large scope, a handgun, and several knives. She was handcuffed, with her arms held tightly by the guards flanking her. "Identify yourself and what you are doing here," Reinette demanded coldly as the additions joined them in the now crowded room. Betty smirked as she replied, "You may call me Betty. For now, I'm watching over the 2 of them," she stated, nodding her head towards Jay and Lexie.